Hey, I ran out of time in the last video. I wanted to show you two more running totals things, so I'll do that in this video and show you a few other things. So this is running totals 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the maximum of a set of numbers, which is super easy, and the average of a set of numbers, which is also easy. You total up all the numbers and you divide by the number of numbers. So while I'm at it, I'm going to show you two other things. One is I'll officially explain what a single line comment is. So any line in Java that begins with a // Java ignores the rest of the line. Or you can even have it at the end of a real line. Like if you have this line, you can do a // and explain what you're doing. So whenever Java sees a // it ignores the rest of the line. Second is I'm going to show you a Sentinel loop. What a Sentinel loop is basically, for this user interface style, when you ask the user for a group of numbers, and you tell them enter like a -1 when you're done with the group of numbers. So that's basically what a Sentinel loop is. You keep looping, asking the user for a number or a person's name or whatever, and then they have some sort of defining entry, it's called a Sentinel, defining entry like a -1 or a stop or something that signals to you that they're done entering numbers. And the code, we'll go through it, but the code looks like this basically. You are continually in a while loop. You're asking the user a question. You're, in our case, updating some totals like an average or a maximum or whatever. And then you keep doing that while the user's input does not equal -1 or whatever Sentinel you want. So this will be clearer when we write the code. So let's hit the computer and write ourselves a few more running totals. Okay, let's start with the max method. So this will return the maximum of a bunch of numbers. It'll look like this to the user. So you'll say enter a bunch of numbers and tell them to put a -1 to end their list. They will enter their list of numbers, and then your method will return the maximum of the numbers they entered. So before we start writing the code, let's decide on what variables we want. We need one variable to be what they keep typing in, so we'll call that input, and we'll have that be a double to allow them to type in decimals and such. And then one variable for our running total, basically to keep track of the maximum, so we'll call that current max. We'll make that a double. And that's it. Let's write the code. Okay. So this will be a public static method for now. It's going to return the maximum, which is a double. And it does not take any arguments. There's nothing we need to pass to this to get it to work. Okay, so like the other running totals, I like to initialize my running total variable, which is current max. That'll be the number. And then I like to return it at the end. So I like to get set up like that. And my other variable was input, and we'll initialize that as well, or declare it. And then we'll have our loop. While, okay, so that's the basic structure of this method. So first of all, before the loop starts, I want to tell the user to enter a bunch of numbers, and I've already written that code up here. So I will just cut and paste it down here. Oh, I said I would teach you single line comments. The reason I call // a single line comment is there's also such a thing as a multi-line comment. But what a single line comment is if you put a // Java ignores the rest of the line. So it can be a whole line like that, or you can put it at the end of another line. This takes no arguments. So it can be a valid line of Java. And then when it hits a // it ignores the rest of the line. So it can either be a line by itself, or after a good line of code you just put a comment there. All right, enter a bunch of numbers. Okay, so for the while loop, what I like to do is start with the while loop itself. And what we're going to do is keep getting an input from the user. So input equals my scanner next double. And then we're going to update our running total. So the way you update a maximum is you see whether they have entered something that's larger than your current max. And if so, you update your current maximum. So if the input is greater than the current max, then the current max is now the input. Basically, take input and stick it into the current max. Okay, so that's the heart of the while loop. Now I like to go back to the condition. You want to quit when they hit -1. So conversely, you want to continue when the input is not -1. Okay, so that's the condition. And then lastly, if you recall, sometimes you have to jury-rig it to run the first time. So input, if you would to compile this right now, you'd see gives an error on input may not have been initialized. So input doesn't have a value the first time through, so you have to give it a value. And you have to give it a value that does not equal -1, so it gets into the loop. So we'll just do 0. Anything but -1. Okay, and that will mostly work. The one other condition you need to cover is if they enter -1 the very first time. So in a sense, there's no maximum. So if there's no maximum, you want to return something back to the user that they will recognize. -1 if no maximum. So why don't we just return -1 if there's no maximum. So what we can do is initialize it to -1. If they don't enter anything, like if they enter -1 for input, it'll drop out of the while loop. It won't update the maximum, and it'll return the -1. That's cool. And if they enter anything, I'm going to say positive numbers. If they enter anything, any positive number is going to be greater than -1, so current max will be a reasonable value. Okay, so let's take a look. Enter a bunch of numbers, and -1 to end, and 3, 5, 6, 7, that looks correct. And then let's do the one where they don't enter anything. -1. Perfect. Good. Okay, we're going to do essentially almost the same thing with average. So what I'm going to do is, let me do the method header, public static double average. And I'm going to, no, I'm not going to copy and paste. Let's think of the variables on average for a sec. So average is going to look the same. A bunch of numbers, and it's going to return the average. So the variables, we're going to use input as well. And then an average, you know, you total up the numbers. So we'll call that sum of numbers. And then you have a count of numbers. You can do that as an integer. The number of numbers. Okay? And then at the end, you do sum divided by count, and that will give you your answer. Okay, so let's initialize those. So double input, double sum, double count. We'll have to come back and give those values probably, but let's get into it first. And as you know, I like to return the answer, which is sum divided by count. Yep. That should work. Okay, now we're going to do the while loop again. So for the while loop, we are going to ask the user to type in a number, and we're going to update our totals. So the way you update your totals is you update the sum, and you update the count. Okay, so we're going to add whatever they typed into the sum, and I'm going to add 1 to the count of numbers. Okay, so that's the heart of the loop. Again, we want to quit when input equals 1, so conversely, keep going while input does not equal -1. And now we have to jury rig input, so it runs once. Anything but -1. And these others, it doesn't like that that those are not initialized either. So sum starting at 0 is good. We'll just keep adding input onto that. Count starting at 0 is good and correct. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now, now we have to deal with the -1. So when they type in -1 right here, we do not want that to be included in our calculation. Okay? So what we want to do is say if input does not equal -1, and we want to put this into here. So -1 does not get included. So that's important. And the other condition that we always want to check for is if they hit -1 first. If they hit -1 first, we will know that because the count will still be 0. So what we can do is if the count is not equal to 0, then we want to return the average. And if it does equal 0, we want to return something so the user of this method knows that they didn't enter anything. So let's return -1. And I forgot to tell the user what to do. Do that down here. Enter positive numbers. Okay, that might work. Let's compile it and see. Close, parenthesis, compile. Looks good. Okay, let's enter a bunch of numbers. Ooh, that was a big one. Okay, average is 17,000. That could be. That's 120,000. Let me pick some numbers. I can probably tell what the average is. This should be around 5. Yeah, that's good. And then let's try -1 right away. Average is -1. Perfect. Okay, so that's it. Let's go to the board and do a quick recap. Okay, so to summarize, there's 3 things actually to remember when you write a loop like this, which keeps asking the user for a number or a word or a sentence or something like that until they type in a special Sentinel value. So the 3 things are, one is sometimes, like with any while loop, you kind of need to rig whatever the condition is so it gets into the loop at least once. So here we set input equal to 0, which wasn't equal to -1 because that was the special character, in order to get into the loop. The second trick is don't forget that you don't want to include that -1 in your running total. So don't use it in the average or the max or the sum or the multiplication or anything that you're doing. Remember when you see that -1 to not do an update to your running totals. And then lastly, remember to handle the special case so you don't have a bug when they put -1 first. So it's actually an empty list. So you have to think about what you want to say about the average or the max or a total of an empty list, and make sure your method handles that case, or force the user to type in something if they do type in a -1. So there are a variety of ways, but you need to think through that one final case. So that's a Sentinel loop, a loop where you keep asking the user a question. And then single line comments, pretty straightforward. // Java ignores the rest of the line. All right, so that's it. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.